go ahead and get started if we could. First of all, my name is Mike Walsh. I'm president of Battery Gadsden Cultural Center, and it's really a thrill to welcome you here tonight. Shall I say to welcome you back again, Because the COVID time has been tough, and not being able to get together, we tried 2 or 3 via Zoom. It just wasn't the same. And what we realized wasn't the same is you didn't get a chance to see everybody. Didn't get a chance to say hello to your neighbor and talk to them. So, yes, we're still dealing with some masks, and we're still dealing with the Delta variant, and this, that, and the other, but it is really, really good to be back. The only reason the Battery Gadsden Cultural Center has survived during COVID is because of an extremely hardworking board of directors. And you may know them already, but even if you do, I want to recognize them. If any of the board of directors are in the audience, please stand up. You too, Hal. Hal Thomas, Carlson Newton, Bill Tobin, Stephanie O'Brien, Susan Middaugh, and Mark Howard. They are the heroes of the past couple of years, believe me. I also want to thank, how about this venue? Is this something? Yeah, very, very nice venue, beautiful space, and we're here because of the hospitality and the help of a gentleman who has just bent over backwards to help us and has been so hospitable, and I'd like to recognize him now. This is our senior minister of Sunrise Presbyterian Church, Reverend Vance Pauley. Let's have a big round of applause. Coming events. We've got some things coming up. If you saw our newsletter, I hope you're aware of them. We won't have anything as far as we're planned in September, but in October we're going to go back to theatrical productions. We will have 2 weekends put on by Pure Theater. They will be one-act plays, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the coming weeks. I hope you will all take advantage of that. And then we're going to have an art show sometime, probably in December perhaps, before Christmas. And then in April, actually, Holy City Opera Company is going to put on Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods down at the Battery. So things are really looking up for this coming season. And that brings me to our always great need to have you join as an official member. I hope you received one of these as you came in. If you didn't, we'll have plenty for you later. But we depend on your memberships. We depend on your generous contributions to run the organization. We have not been able to do some of our fundraisers during COVID, but we hope to be able to get back to that. In the meantime, every one of you, please think about becoming a member of Battery Gadsden Cultural Center. And if you do, that will give you, I don't have a copy of it up here with me, that will give you the opportunity to think about obtaining the new video that has been produced here recently called Architectural Gems of Sullivan's Island. Now, some of you may remember, Stephanie has one, she's waving in the back there, that's the new DVD. Some of you may be well acquainted with the trolley tours that we had a couple of times, headed up by our official historical consultant, Mr. Roy Williams, who's sitting right back here. You know that those sold out in a flash. So we decided to make a video version of the trolley tour. But it's not just the exteriors of 18 unique properties on Sullivan's Island. In a few instances, we had the opportunity to go inside and to video the interior of the house as well. And that you, of course, could not see on the trolley tour. So it is a very, very wonderfully done DVD, and it's a membership benefit. There will be a reception after the general speaks tonight, right back in Fellowship Hall. We have plenty of food, lemonade, iced tea for you, so please be sure to come back there. I think the general will be back there personalizing his book for you if you would like. One other introduction before we get started. We're going to be talking about, or the general's going to be talking about, an individual tonight who received the Congressional Medal of Honor. You may or may not know, I was just informed that there are only 67 living recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor. You know it is our nation's highest military honor. It actually started here in Charleston because of the Civil War, and the connection has continued to the Medal of Honor Museum. But I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you a man who is one of those 67 recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor, a man who received that, plus the Silver Star, plus the Bronze Star for his heroism and actions above and beyond the call of duty in Vietnam. And that is Marine retired Major General James Livingston. General, please stand up. Shut up, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Hal Cost, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you. I'm Hal Cost. I'm going to drop my mask here if I may. A little hard with hearing aids. My wife Karen asked me if I would wear this paper bag over my head. I'm not going to do that. I think I embarrass her sometimes. On behalf of Battery Gadsden, we're very proud. Whoops, how we doing? I'm very proud. We are very proud to present to you tonight Dr. and retired Air Force Major General Perry McCoy Smith. This evening we're going to hear about his father-in-law, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Jimmie Dyess. General Smith will tell us about two incredible stories of Colonel Diaz' heroism. One of these acts of heroism happened right here on Sullivan's Island, Station 18½. But before we hear from him, I'd like to tell General Smith just how welcome he is. And I think I can speak for all of us, or most of us, if not all, when I say that we're living in incredibly difficult times now. The pandemic, Afghanistan, border surge, crime surge, depression. We need you tonight, General Smith, because we need to hear about heroism and American patriotism. We need to be reminded of all the good American men and women who have died for our freedoms. We need to know that the American ideal is not dead. We need to remember these true stories that prove that we live in and will continue to live in the greatest country in the world. You are so welcome to our island world, General Smith. We are so proud to have you speak with us tonight like two aspirin. We need to hear your words knowing we'll feel better in the morning.
Thanks, Hal, so much for that. Jim Livingston and his wife Sarah are dear friends. He's come to Augusta many, many times to honor Connor and honor Jimmie Dyess. And you're very lucky because he lives in this community. He lives right here in Mount Pleasant. His name is Jim Livingston, and he's a terrific guy. So if he can stay for a little while afterwards, you can get to meet somebody who's very, very special. I want to introduce my family. My wife Connor is all white here. She is the daughter of Jimmie Dyess. She was 8 years old when he was killed in combat in 1944, and she's been my wife for 62 years. And then I have the great good fortune of having both my children, McCoy and Serena, and my two grandgirls, Dyess and Porter, and McCoy's wife, Althea. So would you give them all a hand of applause? The Jimmie Dyess story is really, really a remarkable story. And it took me a long time to figure out how unique it was. That his heroism here and his heroism in combat was very, very special. And it all happened here in Sullivan's Island in July of 1928, where Jimmie Dyess was walking up the beach. He was 19 years old. He was an undergraduate at Clemson College. He'd been playing football there. He was in pretty good shape. He was an Eagle Scout. And there was a lady in great, great difficulty, and another woman had gone in to try to save her, and she was not being successful. Jimmie Dyess, by himself, with no help of anybody else, swam 600 feet into the surf, out into that swirling water that we have off the coast of Sullivan's Island. And after a long, difficult time, he saved basically both women. He awarded the Carnegie Medal for saving the woman who was drowning, but the other woman was in such bad shape that she probably would not have made it if it hadn't been for Jimmie Dyess. When he got to the beach, he was exhausted. He fell on the beach, and he looked over, and they were giving artificial respiration the wrong way. They had her going uphill instead of downhill. So he got up, turned her around, and did the old-fashioned artificial respiration, pushing on the back. She spit up a lot of water, and she survived. So he survived, and Miss Muller, who tried to save her, survived, and the lady survived. So he earned the Carnegie Medal for that event, and the next year at Clemson, they had a special parade for him for earning the Carnegie Medal. Now, I want to stop right now and talk a little bit about this medal, because many in this audience know a lot about the Medal of Honor. But the Carnegie Medal is not very well known. It's a really special medal. It is the highest civilian award for heroism in this country and Canada. It works together with the two countries. Andrew Carnegie was a very special guy. He was the greatest philanthropist in the history of the world. And when he got to be, when he sold his company off, he gave away 95% of his money. 95% of his money. He started a bunch of foundations with big endowments. He gave the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission, which he started on his own. He gave them $5 million, which was a lot of money in those days, and it still exists today. Right now, it has an endowment of $40 million, just so how well it was invested. But he wanted the money to not only have a medal for these wonderful heroes, but also help them financially. Because back in the day, back in 1904, there wasn't SSI or workman's comp and all that. And a number of these people either hurt badly or died and left their family destitute. So the idea was to not only give them a medal, but also give them a chance to have a life. And he continued to do that. 100 years later in Pittsburgh, there was a 100-year anniversary of the Carnegie Medal. Pittsburgh was his home, was Andrew Carnegie's home. At that event, I had the opportunity of being the banquet speaker, largely because of the Jimmie Dyess story. And so I had a chance to meet some of the Carnegie Medal recipients. And I want to tell you a couple of stories, because these are really good stories. The woman who was 83 years old, she was 86 when I met her, but she was 83 years old, climbed over a fence, dove into a lake, swam way out, and saved a woman who'd gone under 3 times. Saved her life. And so I asked her, she was a tiny little lady from Shreveport, Louisiana. I asked her, why did you do that? And she says, well, my husband was too old and feeble. He couldn't get over the fence. So she did what she really needed to do. I talked to another man who was quite a large fellow and a much younger man. I said, what did you do to earn the medal? He said, well, I pulled a lady out of a burning car. Actually, it was a van. I pulled her out of a van, and it was burning, and I had to get her out of there. And I said, well, what was hard about it? He said, well, it was pretty hard because I couldn't get the front doors open, so I had to go through the back door, and I had to lift her up over the seat and get her out the door. I said, was that pretty hard? He says, that was hard because she weighed more than 300 pounds, and she was disabled, so she couldn't help herself. But the story I love to tell isn't one that I learned in Pittsburgh. It's the story of the 11-year-old boy who found out that a baby had fallen into an abandoned cesspool through a little small concrete opening that no adult could get through. But he was really skinny and he could. So the firemen lowered him down, upside down. They had him tied by his legs,
lowered him down and picked up this tiny baby, down 18 feet into the muck and into the dirt and into the smell. And he picked up that baby, he lifted the baby up, they lifted him up, and right when they get to the top, he dropped the baby. And back, plump, back into the muck he goes. The little boy says, I gotta go back. So they gave him a basket, tied his legs again, lowered him down, he put the baby in the basket, they pulled him all the way up, and he saved that baby. He earned the Carnegie Medal at age 11. So when I was talking in Augusta fairly recently, I talked to a bunch of 5th graders who were all 11, and I asked them if they would do that. And the interesting thing was how many actually held up their hands. They would, in fact, do something like that. So it's a very special medal. They just celebrated very recently the 10,000th person to earn the Carnegie Medal. They give away about 80 or 90 every year. They have a clipping service in New Jersey that clips out more than 10,000 acts of heroism that take place in America every year. Then they send them over to Pittsburgh and they look at them very carefully. It has to be at great risk to your life in very extraordinary circumstances, and you have to either save somebody or at least attempt to save somebody. By the way, 25% of the recipients of the Carnegie Medal receive it posthumously. They lose their life trying to save these people. They then look very, very carefully about it, and they send a team out, and they make sure that that is a legitimate act of real heroism. So there are a lot of people who, save puppy dogs and save other things, but if it's not really heroic, an extraordinary amount, they do not earn the Carnegie Medal. So as I mentioned, they're past the 10,000 mark. So it's a wonderful, wonderful medal, and you may see a situation around you here where somebody does something really heroic. Contact the Carnegie people, let them know what they did, and they may be able to get the medal that they deserve. Now, I had the executive director down to Augusta, my home. We live in Augusta. And I asked him, I said, why don't you publicize this? Why don't you let people know about the heroism that's going on in America that you recognize? And the answer he gave me, and I'm not totally comfortable with it, the answer he gave me is we don't want to encourage people to do really dumb things. We're afraid if we really encourage people to do this kind of thing, they'll do something beyond what they really ought to do. And so they do not publicize it, but it's there, it's available to people, and I hope that you keep an eye on your newspapers and salute people that do it. Okay, so now Jimmie Dyess has finished earning his Carnegie Medal. He goes back to Clemson, and he was playing football there, but he got hurt his junior year, and he ends up being a marksman. He was an All-American marksman at Clemson University, and he led the Southeast ROTC marksmanship team to Camp Carey, and they won the top award. The only time the ROTC unit had ever won the top award. So he was a no-kidding, really good marksman. He went into the Army Reserves when he went back to Augusta, and then he moved to the Marine Reserves in 1936. He was on the Marine Reserve marksmanship team for a couple of years in the late 30s. He was called up in 1940 when the problems with the war were going on, and they called up all the Marine units, all the Guard and the Reserve units were called up, and he ended up in a job he really didn't want. He was the head of the Barrage Balloon School, which was not a particularly interesting mission and not a very important mission, but then they moved him over and he became a battalion commander of the 24th Marines, 1st Battalion, 24th Marines out of Camp Pendleton, and that's where he trained his Marines to go to combat. When they went to combat, the 4th Marine Division went directly into combat. They did not stop for training in Australia. They did not stop for training in Hawaii. They went directly into combat, into Marshall Islands. The Army took the Kwajalein Atoll, and the Marines took a double atoll called Roy Namor. And in that first day of the battle, he went behind enemy lines and rescued 4 badly wounded Marines who were surrounded by the enemy. And then the next day, in the final day of the battle, leading his troops up front, he was shot and killed. And that was that. So Connor learned about losing her father again when she was 8 years old. So now I come down to Augusta after living all over the place, and I come to Augusta and say, what's happening? What are we doing to honor Jimmie Dyess in Augusta? Well, the answer was almost nothing. But fortunately, they now have a Jimmie Dyess Parkway. We now have a Jimmie Dyess Symposium every year, so we're able to honor him as we go forward. Then I decided, well, it was such a unique story. I need to write a book about this guy. I'd written a couple of books, I knew how to do that, but I'd never done a biography. And so I decided to contact the Carnegie folks. This is 20 years ago or so, and I said, how many people have earned the Medal of Honor and the Carnegie Medal? And they said, no, nobody has. Nobody can't do it. Only civilians can win the Carnegie Medal. I said, well, I have in my home an original Carnegie Medal and an original Medal of Honor. And explain the fact that Jimmie Dyess earned it when he was a civilian, a Carnegie Medal, and the Medal of Honor later. They said, we never thought about that. I don't think anybody else did it. So then I called the Medal of Honor folks. Now, they were up in New York in those days. That was before they moved down here. So I called one of the people down there and I said, how many people have received the Medal of Honor and also the Carnegie Medal? They said, what's the Carnegie Medal? The answer to whoever I was talking to didn't know what a Carnegie Medal was. So then I had to take the 8,000 Carnegie Medal recipients' names and the 3,500, almost 3,500 Medal of Honor names, had to go through them one by one by one by one to see how many names were the same. Well, there were a few. There were some Murphys and a couple of Joneses and all that. But when it turned out, none of them were the same in the sense one earned the Medal of Honor in Gettysburg and somebody else earned the Carnegie Medal in 1955. It could not be the same person. And that's when that's when I finally realized that this was a truly, truly unique story. And I seriously doubt that we'll ever have anybody who has earned both medals. It's so hard to do both. It's not likely to happen. So I am happy to be here. I was invited to come. I'm going to talk for a few more minutes, and then we're going to open up to any questions you have. I have brought books, and the books are presents to you. I want you to have the book if you want the book. But I want to ask you two things. One is you've got to commit to read the book. And the second thing is you've got to commit to share the book with others, particularly with younger folks, because it's a wonderful story of a wonderful person. So I'll be in the reception room and signing some books as we go forward. I want to talk a little bit about the Jimmie Dyess Symposium, which is held in Augusta every year, the second Thursday in January. He was born on the 11th of January, so we use it as the time for doing it. We bring to that event every year a living Medal of Honor recipient. And we salute that person, not so much for his heroism, but for all the wonderful work he does to support worthy causes. And Jim Livingston is a great example of that. Since he's retired, he's done wonderful things in New Orleans and down here and all that. So it's the only event in America where every year we have a living Medal of Honor recipient. So you're welcome to come. It's only a 3-hour drive to Augusta. It takes place at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, the second Thursday, the 13th of January, 2022. And the person we're going to have, the Medal of Honor person we're going to have this coming year, is Bob Carey. Now, Bob Carey probably comes into your mind a little bit because he was the governor and the senator from Nebraska. He ran for the presidency of the United States. And so he was really quite well known. He was a SEAL, had most of his foot blown off in combat, was a Medal of Honor recipient. So he'll be there. And we also honor a few local people who have done so many wonderful things to support worthy causes. So the Jimmie Dyess Symposium is something you might want to come to someday, this year or the next year or the next year. It's free. It only lasts about an hour. And you get to meet some really special people, including a Medal of Honor recipient. And we'll have more as we go forward. I'm trying to think if I have anything else. What have I missed, Connor?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
No, you don't. I think I'll stop now because I have all of a sudden run out of things to say, but I do want to open it up for any comments or questions or criticisms that you might have about this wonderful story. Who would like to ask me a question or make a point? Yes, sir.
What was the album again that he was first my band was in CD. I just in there.
You want?
What island is he on?
The island in combat
Yes.
was an island called Roy Namor. It was an island that was really two islands, but it was put together by a runway, so it was called Roy No More. It was in the Marshall Islands, and the time of the combat was late January and early February of 1944. The reason that particular battle was not well known was because it was so successful. Unlike the real problems of Guadalcanal and Tarawa and some others, the Marshall's campaign was over in less than a week. The number of casualties were pretty low. It was an important battle because these islands were very strategic in the middle of the Central Pacific. Nimitz made a big risk to go after them, but it's lost to history because it went well. That was too bad, but that's the case. Roy No More in the Marshall Islands. Yes, sir.
Sir, when did you join the Marine Corps, and why the Marine Corps and not the Air Force?
Well, thank you, sir. I have a Marine shirt on, but I was in the Air Force.
Where are you?
But I love the Marine Corps, of course.
Fly them anywhere they want.
And my wife loves the Marine Corps more than the Air Force by a long shot. But no, when I graduated from the Military Academy in 1956, there was no Air Force Academy. So 25% of the class of 1956 and some of the other classes got a chance to go in the Air Force. I wanted to fly airplanes. I got a chance to fly airplanes and ended up retiring. And then we moved to Augusta, Connor's home, because I had no home. I was an Army brat. I left the country when I was 6 months old. And so therefore it was great. But I'm sorry, maybe a second-class citizen, but I'm an Air Force guy. Yes, sir.
What station on the island was the rescue done?
On this island?
Yes.
It was 18 and a half, station 18 and a half.
Okay.
And apparently at that time there were a lot of drownings or near drownings because of the turmoil of the water. And it wasn't a storm, it was just that she was caught in the undertow and was being dragged out and wasn't able to come back. So 18 and a half. And there are some plans underway to memorialize Jimmie Dyess' heroism right there with a marker and perhaps a small little park. There's some talk about that, and I would certainly hope we would do that. But the marker would basically tell the story of his heroism here, but also mention the unique nature of his life as a Medal of Honor recipient. 18 and a half. Yes, sir.
So what was his profession as a civilian?
Excuse me?
What was his profession as a civilian? What did he do?
Yeah, he was an architect. And when he graduated from Clemson, he went back to Augusta, Georgia, which was his home. Unfortunately, it was 1931, so there weren't many jobs. He ended up working for his dad, who was the head of the Augusta Lumber Company. And then he broke loose and started his own company. And he was involved in building homes in Augusta. Wasn't particularly successful at doing that, but his profession was architecture. But he loved the military. He went to high school, Richmond Academy in Augusta, Georgia, which was a military school. He went to Clemson, which was a military school. He was in the Army Reserves and then the Marine Reserves. So he just loved the discipline and the commitment and the patriotism of the military. Yes, sir.
How did you connect with Hal Cost so we could be honored by having you here?
Well, thank you. I came here a couple of years ago to speak to the Rotary Club and to the Boy Scouts. And that's when I first met Hal. And that's how it all got going, I think. Did we have connection before that?
No, sir. I met you at Patriots Point, and I had the honor of escorting you back over here to the island because he wanted to see rescue operations. And I think they didn't understand what he wanted to see, so they took him to the fire station, showed him some fire engines, and I think we're going into a little more detail this time.
Well, I was with the deputy chief of the fire department yesterday,
Yeah.
and she says they save a lot of lives, the fire department does, and they do it with jet skis. They don't do it with boats, they do it with jet skis. So if you have anybody drowning on Sullivan's Island, call the fire department, 911 or whatever you do, because they can do good work.
You might mention Ron Plunkett has been very helpful too.
Oh, is Ron Plunkett here tonight?
No, I don't think he is. He's
Okay.
on the scout meeting.
Okay, there's a fellow here in town named Ron Plunkett, who is one of these dynamo people who's involved in all kinds of things. He's very supportive of Jim with his speeches and his work and all that business. If you ever run into Ron Plunkett, he's a Citadel grad and a really, really good guy. Thank you for mentioning him. Yes, sir.
Sir, did you know General Hal Hornberg?
I know Hal Hornberg very, very well.
I was at Al Cars in 1990.
Hal?
Like fourth fighter wing, right?
I'm sorry, I'm missing that.
I think he was with the fourth fighter wing because he was the in-charge guy there at Al Cars.
That's exactly right. He was a student of mine at the National War College. When I was a commandant of the National War College in the early 80s, he went on and became the wing commander of the 4th Fighter Wing out of Seymour Johnson, got involved in the First Gulf War, and ended up being a 4-star general. I have been in contact with him. He settled down in Texas. Hal Hornberg, really good guy.
I have a question. In all your years in the sky, and General Smith flew 180 combat missions over North Vietnam and Laos, what is your experience with UFOs?
With UFOs? I promised myself I'd talk nothing about Jimmie Dyess, but I will say that I have seen a lot of unusual things in the air. A lot of unusual things in the air. But every time I checked it out, there was a reason for what it was. It was a balloon, a weather balloon, or it was a gunfire on the ground or something. So I have had none experience with UFOs, and I'm a little skeptical about them. Now, having said that, I will say that I have been to Area 51, the famous Area 51 in Nevada, where we do a lot of super secret stuff, but it has lots to do with airplanes and nothing to do with UFOs. I'm sorry to tell you that. Who else would have any questions? Yes, Stephanie, is that you? Yeah.
Could you share with us a little bit about your childhood in Hawaii?
Yes, I was going to stick with Jimmie Dyess, but I'll tell this one story. When I was a little boy, I lived in Hawaii. My dad moved around a lot. He was a Coast artilleryman. He would have been really happy with the trip that I had yesterday, looking at all the battlements. And his job was to protect the harbor with these big 16-inch guns. On the way to Sunday school on the 7th of December, 1941, almost 80 years ago, I was in the back of an Army truck and did not make it to Sunday school that day because I got a chance to witness the attack on Pearl Harbor at age 6, almost 7. I can still remember it at this time. And then we were evacuated out of Hawaii and ended up in St. Cloud, Minnesota. So I went from barefoot Hawaii to St. Cloud. I made my first public speech at age 7 because my teacher said, they called me McCoy in those days. He said, McCoy, you've got to tell your Pearl Harbor story. So I've been on the lecture circuit for almost 80 years. And at age 86, I'm beginning to wonder whether that's such a good idea now. But I appreciate you all coming out, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
What type of aircraft did you fly?
I started off in trainers with the T-34, the T-38, the T-33, the F-4, the F-100, the 104, and the F-15. So the last airplane I flew was the F-15. I was a wing commander. I had 80 of them that belonged to me. I could fly them anytime I wanted to, which was kind of cool. And so I always was a fighter guy, and I flew fighter airplanes and loved it and loved the people. The fighter community are a bunch of crazy, fun people, but they became very dear friends. Yes, sir. I did know Robin Olds. I didn't know him very well, but he was a very, very good fighter pilot. He was an All-American football player at West Point. He shot down a bunch of airplanes in World War II, and then he shot 4 airplanes down in the Vietnam War. And the reason he didn't shoot the 5th one down is he didn't want to shoot the 5th one down because he knew they'd yank him back to the States and let him maybe quit flying. So he always turned over the MiG to somebody else. That's a true story. And I got to know him when he was a commandant of cadets at the United States Air Force Academy. I was teaching there. I had flown in the same unit that he had flown in, the Triple Nickel Squadron, and so we had something in common, so I did visit with him a couple of times. He was quite a guy. You know, he had his deputy over there when he was the wing commander at Ubon, Thailand, His deputy was a black man. What was his first name? Chappie James. And it was called, the group was called Black Man and Robin. Because Chappie James was black and Robin was Robin Olds. And they were quite a pair. Chappie James ended up a 4-star general. He was an incredibly smart and very articulate person. Had a very difficult time during the Vietnam War. He was a very, very sharp guy, but he died very early. He was still on active duty, I think, when he died. Chappie James. Robin Olds. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I was just about to say, you mentioned the Marshall Islands and how they're not very well known.
Yes.
When I went to the Navy, I was landed out there in the middle of nowhere, Quadrant, and so I've always sort of paid attention to the Marshall Islands. But I realized that sort of how many people are actually dropped off there to join this ship. And of course, the bikinis later on, I guess people don't associate with the Marshall Islands.
Well, the Kwajalein Atoll has about 100 islands. Kwajalein is the largest islands, I'm sure you know. And then Roy de Moor is a smaller set of islands about 50 miles away. But they're very important today because that's where NASA and the Department of Defense does much of its space surveillance because the sky is so clear there. And they do all kinds of testing there. So there are probably 600 or 700 civilian contractors and another maybe 100 military people. My wife and I have visited there twice. Our son visited there. And they have on the island of Roy de Moor, they have a park which honors Jimmie Dyess. And they also have an airfield called the Dyess Field. And they have 8 members of the native people who take up that who take care of that battlefield. It's beautifully taken care of. And also, people who live on that island or work on that island know the Jimmie Dyess story. They know it well. Yes, sir, way in the back.
From age 7, I was wondering what sort of memories and impressions are made of you.
I have great, very, very clear memories because I talked about it. I lectured on it all through the war and ever since. And I can remember what it was like to be in the back of that Army truck, which I had gone on many times on Sunday morning. Our parents, my sister and I would get on the truck and go to Sunday school at Fort DeRussy, right near Waikiki Beach, right near Hickam Field. And my family, my mother and dad would go back to bed because Saturday night was a big party night. They got rid of their kids for a couple hours and we went off to Sunday school. Well, then the attack starts. We pull up to the main gate, and we stop. We never had stopped at the main gate. Normally, we just got run on through. So I was sitting in the very back of the truck. I had a motion sickness problem, so I couldn't sit in the main part of the truck. I had to sit in the back and look out the back. So I looked around, and there was an Army captain with a pistol on, and he was talking to the driver. And they didn't tell us anything in the back that the driver turned that truck around and we raced back, dropping the kids back where they had come from. They didn't tell us what was going on. I had to hang on to the bench and they would have thrown me out the back. I was crying, I was not happy. I don't remember hearing any aircraft noise or any bombs because the noise of the truck was so high. But then as I got off, and my sister, who's 8 and I was 6, got off the truck, there was our mother in the front yard, happy to see her 2 babies come back from the war, because she knew the war was going on. And so she gave us both a big hug, and I was really surprised. We didn't hug in our family. You know, when you were 6, you were too old to get hugged. And there I was getting a hug, and I couldn't figure it out. So then we went down in the basement, and I got out my bow and arrow, because I was going to shoot the Japanese paratroopers when they came. We were evacuated in Hawaii in February 1942. 2,000 of us on a ship that only held 750. So my grandmother did not get a seat on the lifeboat. Anybody over to 40 got a life vest, but no seat on the lifeboat. So that was interesting. Just the other day, I made a speech up in Lincolnton, Georgia, and a man who was on that same ship going out of Hawaii was there. So we had a chance to talk about that. But those memories are really quite vivid from the Pearl Harbor experience.
Let me commend Carey too. He was very helpful with the Medal of Honor Foundation, with the mechanism we use to raise money where we can support the activities of the Medal of Honor. He did a great job. The other thing he was very much involved in is a great book about the Medal of Honor. There's about 160 recipients, stories in that book. And Carey, again, was a very key element in helping put that book together. So he raised a real round of applause for all that great work.
Thank you. Before I let you go to the reception, I do want to talk a little bit about that book. It's a big tabletop book called Medal of Honor. And it highlights the living recipients and some of the ones who recently have died. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. So if you haven't seen that book or gotten a copy of that book or given that book to your kids, you might want to do so. I had the honor of editing that book. I'd written some books, so I was able to help the person who actually did the writing. And the book did really well, and for a while it was in every high school in the country. It's called Medal of Honor by Peter Collier. And if you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to take a look at it. It's a wonderful book. Thank you very much, Jim.
General, one more question. Would you please tell the story of when you were landing your F-15 and the throttle stuck wide open?
Hold on, I gotta move because my legs are moving now. Is there a seat behind me? Help.
I just got to hear. Last question from me, I promise.
Okay. Sorry about that. You want me to tell a flying story? Well, I have a lot of flying stories.
Stuck throttle.
Your throttle was stuck wide open.
Okay, I'm flying a single seat F-100 airplane at high altitude in Europe. And I tried to bring the throttle back because I'm going to go ahead and land, and the throttle is stuck in full military. In other words, I'm going fast and it wants me to go faster. And I don't want to go fast because I want to go down. I want to go down, and the throttle is frozen stuck. And so I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I put my feet up on the instrument panel, took both hands, and I was going to break it off because I wanted people to see that I really tried to make it come out. But I couldn't break it off, and finally I said, well, I'm going to go down. But unfortunately, the weather was really bad. So what I could have done in really good weather, I could have gone around tight circles and lost a lot of airspeed and landed. But it's hard to do that in really bad weather. And so I declared an emergency, and as I went down into the clouds, thinking this is going to be really hard, the throttle broke loose, and I was able to land. That's one of many stories. Oh my goodness. Any more questions? You all have been a great audience.
You said you had motion sickness. How did that affect your flying?
When I went through flying school at Marana, Arizona in 1956, on the dollar ride I got in the back seat, I got very, very sick. And the instructor, who was a senior instructor, said, some people can fly airplanes and some people can't. And I thought I was going to wash out. The big challenge was a 10-turn spin. You would go up to 10,000 feet, you pull the stick way back, pull the throttle in, and pull the throttle back and everything. And the airplane would stall out, and then it would go into a spin. And you were supposed to spin 10 times before you recovered. Well, for somebody with motion sickness, pointing straight at the ground, going around 10 times, that was not very pleasant. I got sick about 65 times, but the instructor pilot never turned me in. He says, you fly well after you get sick, so you can stay with it. And then they let me go to single-seat airplanes. I was getting sick with other people, but not so much with myself, and so I was in single-seat airplanes most of my career. But I was very, very fortunate to have an instructor pilot, a civilian instructor pilot, who was willing to let me throw my barf bag into the dirt and not
Thank you.
I think we probably had enough, so we'll see you at the reception. Thank you so much for coming.
We've had many wonderful speakers in our series, but I think this is probably one of the best and certainly the most unique. We thank you so much for coming to visit us tonight. Another round of applause for Jim. Okay, fellowship hall is straight down the corridor, and there should be some food and drink, and the gentleman will be in there personalizing books for you. Thanks so much, folks.
Thanks for coming.
We hope to see you again in the near future.
Have you heard the Jimmie Dyess story? No, you've heard it.
Yeah,
give me a book and a cake years ago. Yeah.